You didn't need it anyway, my father said, his voice casual through the phone speaker, as if he hadn't just admitted to stealing my entire college fund. He said it like he was talking about the weather, like it was some tiny inconvenience I'd surely get over. At 25 years old, standing in my tiny apartment in London, I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The words came out of his mouth so simply, but they carried the weight of years of work, years of sacrifice, years of believing that maybe, just maybe, he saw me as his daughter, and not as a backup plan. That college fund was never a gift from him. It was mine, built from scholarships, part-time jobs, tutoring, even babysitting late into the night when my friends were out living their 20s the way I thought I'd one day live mine. Every paycheck, every small deposit into that account felt like planting seeds for my future. I had watered them with exhaustion and hope, and now he had ripped the entire garden out with one greedy hand. How much is left? I asked, my voice steady, though my hands shook so hard I had to grip the desk to keep myself upright. None of it's left, honey. I had some debts to clear up, he said. And then, as if he was doing me a favor, he added, "But don't worry, you're smart, you'll figure something out." Figure something out. That was his solution. As though my future was a puzzle he had the right to scatter, and I should just sit patiently picking up the pieces. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. I whispered. "That's my girl," he replied, mistaking my silence for compliance. "Always practical, just like your old dad. Listen, I've got to run meeting some friends for drinks. We'll talk soon." He hung up just like that, and I was left staring at the cracked paint on the wall of my rented apartment. My reflection faint in the laptop screen, my heart pounding, friends for drinks with my money, my future. The room felt smaller than ever. Outside, the London street I'd fallen in love with during my semester abroad bustled with life. People walked with purpose, carrying their coffees, their shopping bags, their laughter. And I stood there holding the knowledge that my own father had gutted me financially and emotionally with the casual shrug of a man ordering another pint at the bar. Then my phone buzzed again, a text. "Don't mention this to your mom or grandmother. No need to worry them." I felt the words crawl over my skin like something alive. Of course he didn't want them to know. Just like he hadn't wanted them to know about the gambling debts, the failed business ventures, the constant cycle of borrowing and never repaying. This wasn't just one mistake. This was a pattern, and I had been too hopeful or too naive to see it clearly. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The shaking in my hands turned into something else now: purpose. If he thought I would just crumble, he was wrong. First, documentation. Bank statements showing the account history, proof of my deposits, screenshots of the scholarships I had earned, then research, legal aid services, financial assistance, part-time jobs that might cover what I had lost. I remembered all the times he had underestimated me. "Good thing you're pretty," he would say whenever I brought home straight A's, as though my appearance was my only true asset. "You can always marry rich if college doesn't work out." But college wasn't some backup plan. It was my plan, my dream, my proof to myself that I could be more than his shadow, more than his daughter defined by his failures. He thought my calm meant acceptance, but calm was exactly what he should fear. Over the next week, I pieced together the extent of his betrayal. The account had held just over $42,000. 42,000. Money I had earned, saved, and protected for nearly a decade, gone. My roommate Emma found me one evening surrounded by papers, my desk a storm of highlighted statements and printed screenshots. She leaned over my shoulder, reading. "Your father did what?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. "Can't you report him for theft?" I wanted to laugh, or cry, or both. The account still had his name on it, I explained quietly. Legally, he had every right to access it. I just never thought he'd actually do it. Emma shook her head, furious on my behalf. But fury wasn't enough to rebuild what I'd lost. Meanwhile, his texts kept coming. "Don't stress about the money. You worry too much. Maybe this is a sign you should take a break from school. I know some guys who could get you a modeling job, better money than that degree anyway." Each message sliced deeper, not because of the content, but because of the truth beneath it. He didn't value my education. He didn't value my independence. To him, I was just another resource to drain another safety net for his recklessness. But I wasn't going to be his safety net anymore. I started making calls to the university's financial aid office, to legal advisors, and finally to the one person who had always been my anchor, my grandmother. She had championed my education from the beginning, pressing $20 bills into my palm before exams with the words, "For snacks and coffee." "Study hard, darling." She had always believed in me even when my father dismissed me. I didn't tell her everything at first, just that I was in a financial bind and needed advice. Her response came immediately. "Come home, sweetheart. We'll figure this out together." But I wasn't ready to run home in defeat, not yet. Instead, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice weary but warm. I hesitated, but before I could explain, she said, "Your father told me you're thinking about taking time off from school, moving back home." My stomach clenched. Already he was rewriting the story. Already he was bending the truth into his own version, painting me as the one walking away from my dreams instead of the one he had stolen them from. "No, Mom," I said firmly, my throat thick with unshed tears. "That's not the truth." And it was then I knew I would need to show them everything. The bank statements, the texts, the casual cruelty in his voice, all of it. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my future. About refusing to let him erase me with a single selfish decision. That night, as I closed my laptop and stared out at the London street below, I whispered to myself a promise. He thinks he's ended my future, but he has no idea I'm just getting started. I thought about my father's words all night, the way he had spoken so casually about draining everything I'd built. There was no apology, no remorse, just entitlement. He believed, as he always had, that I would bend, that I would swallow my anger because family forgives. But I wasn't that little girl anymore, the one who handed him my birthday money because he promised to pay it back someday. I wasn't the teenager who co-signed papers she didn't understand because he said it was just to help his credit. I was 25, standing on my own feet in London, fighting for a future I had carved out by myself. And this time I would not bend. I compiled every bank statement into a folder. I highlighted the dates, the withdrawals, the steady bleeding of my savings until the balance hit zero. I included the text messages, his dismissive words about my education, the ones where he tried to redirect me into some shallow life he thought I was suited for. He had left a trail of arrogance, and now it was evidence. When I called my grandmother again, my voice shook not from fear, but from the weight of finally telling her the truth. She listened silently, her breath steady, only speaking once I had finished. "That man," she said, her voice trembling with fury, "has gone too far this time. Stealing from your own daughter. My own granddaughter." I heard a chair scrape in the background, then her calling for my mother. Within minutes, my grandmother had arranged what she called an emergency family meeting, without him. On the video call that night, I saw my grandmother, my mother, and my Aunt Sarah, her hair pulled back, her lawyer's eyes sharp. I showed them everything, the bank statements, the screenshots, the timeline. My mother's face went pale, her hands trembling as she read the messages. "I had no idea," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He told me you were the one who wanted to take a break from school, that you were tired." I felt anger coil in my stomach. The audacity of him not only stealing from me but smearing me to cover his tracks. This wasn't just betrayal, it was character assassination. "He's always been like this," I said, my voice low, rewriting the story so it benefits him, twisting my achievements into something about him, undermining me while smiling in public. Aunt Sarah leaned forward. "The account is tricky since his name was on it. But this," she pointed at the emails and texts on the screen, "this is leverage. He acknowledged the money was for your education. He admitted it was yours. That matters." For the first time in days, I felt something close to hope. Maybe there was a way forward. "Grandma," her voice steady with a kind of righteous fire, said, "He's always underestimated you, Vanessa, treated you like you were his safety net. Time to show him you're not his backup plan. You're your own person." That night, my father called again. His voice was softer this time, testing the waters. "Your grandmother seemed upset today. You didn't tell her anything, did you?" I swallowed my anger. "About what, Dad?" "The college fund you stole. The future you tried to derail." There was silence on his end, long enough for me to hear the blood pounding in my ears. Then he tried again, the old nickname dripping from his tongue like poison disguised as sugar. Now, princess? Don't call me that, I cut him off. My voice was sharp, clear. Don't call me at all. Everything goes through Aunt Sarah from now on. Why would your aunt need to be involved? He asked, his tone edging into panic. Because she's a lawyer, Dad, I said coldly. And you're about to need one too. His breath caught. He didn't say another word before hanging up, but his silence didn't last long. Soon the texts began flooding in. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was just money. Family is more important than money. Then you're ruining my life. My own daughter turning against me, after everything I've done for you. Every message was another nail in the coffin of the illusion I had clung to all my life. That somewhere beneath it all, my father loved me enough not to hurt me this deeply. But love isn't what he had shown. Control, entitlement, manipulation. That was his language. Days later, my grandmother called me again. He showed up at my house, she said, her voice firm. Tried to get in, tried to smooth talk me. I didn't let him pass the porch. I imagined the scene, my father standing there, slick words on his lips, expecting his mother to bail him out like she always had, and instead finding a wall of steel in her eyes. What did you say to him, I asked. Her voice rose fierce and unshaken. I told him, stealing your daughter's college fund? Have you no shame? And then I told him to leave before I called the police. For the first time in years, I smiled, really smiled. He was losing control of the story. Still, he kept trying. He messaged me constantly. Your grandmother has turned you against me. You're my daughter. You owe me respect. Respect. I thought about all the times he had dismissed my academic achievements, borrowed my savings, treated my education as something trivial. Respect wasn't something he had ever earned, and now it was something he had lost forever. Aunt Sarah drafted a formal demand letter. She laid out every detail, every withdrawal, every text, every acknowledgement that the money was mine. She gave him two options: restitution or legal action. You can't sue your own father, he scoffed on the phone when he received it. Watch me, I replied, and I hung up. The fallout spread through the family like wildfire. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years began calling, expressing their disgust. Stories surfaced: loans he had never repaid, money borrowed from children's birthday cards, business deals that had collapsed under his irresponsibility. He's always been like this, my Aunt Patricia said on a call. Taking what isn't his. Expecting everyone to forgive him because he's family. For the first time, I saw it clearly. This wasn't just my fight. He had hurt all of us. I just happened to be the one who had drawn the line. My mother, finally breaking under the weight of years of financial betrayal, filed for divorce. She cited financial infidelity as one of the reasons, an ugly phrase that fit perfectly. The man who had drained my future now watched as the life he had built on lies began to unravel. And I, for once, didn't feel powerless. I felt strong. Stronger than he had ever allowed me to believe I could be. The weeks after the demand letter were a blur of chaos and silence. Chaos because my father couldn't help himself. His calls, his messages, his sudden appearances at relatives' homes all reeked of desperation. Silence because I refused to answer. I learned quickly that ignoring him infuriated him more than any insult ever could. He thrived on reactions, on controlling the narrative. Without my voice, without my compliance, he was left screaming into a void that refused to echo back. But silence did not mean stillness. Behind the scenes, Aunt Sarah was gathering more evidence. Every careless word my father had texted, every acknowledgement that the money had been for my education, it all became ammunition. Meanwhile, my mother began untangling herself from him. I could hear the weariness in her voice every time we spoke, like she was finally realizing how many years she had spent covering for him. I thought I was protecting you, she admitted one night, her voice breaking. But really, I was just enabling him. I thought he'd change. I thought if I gave him enough chances, he'd finally become the husband and father he promised to be. Her words hurt, not because I blamed her, but because I understood them too well. How many times had I given him another chance, believing in the father I wanted instead of the man he was? But the illusion was gone now. All that remained was truth. The court filings began, formal and heavy with language I barely understood, but Aunt Sarah translated every word. My father had two choices: return the money or face legal consequences. He chose denial. He stormed into the first mediation session with his old confidence, insisting he had every right to the funds. It was my account, he said smoothly. My money. She's ungrateful. I put a roof over her head, food on her table, and now she wants to sue me for paying off a few debts. For a moment, the old wound opened inside me. He had always wielded guilt like a weapon, reminding me of the basics he had provided, as if parenting was a transaction I should eternally repay. But then Aunt Sarah slid the folder across the table. Your texts, your admissions, your signatures. You called it her education fund more than once. You told her not to tell her mother or grandmother. That's not how a legitimate account holder talks. That's how a thief talks. His jaw tightened, his eyes flashing, but for once words failed him. After that meeting, he tried another tactic: pity. He called my grandmother, sobbing into the phone, begging her to talk some sense into me. But Grandma, bless her heart, stood firmer than ever. "She's not the one who stole Richard," she said, her voice ringing like a bell. "You are, and you've been stealing from her for years: time, money, respect. You should be grateful she's only asking for what's hers." I cried when she told me later, not from sadness, but from the strange ache of finally being defended. Yet even as the case built momentum, part of me wrestled with grief. He was still my father. I remembered the nights when he had tucked me into bed, telling stories about his childhood. I remembered birthdays when he did try, when his laughter filled the house. But those memories felt like old photographs, faded, unreliable, warped by time. And then, just when I thought I had mapped the extent of his betrayal, another truth surfaced. One evening, my grandmother handed me a worn box she had kept hidden in her attic. Inside were letters, handwritten notes from my father to various family members spanning decades. They were apologies, promises to repay money, pleas for one more chance. "You weren't the first," she said quietly, "and you won't be the last unless this ends here." I sifted through the letters, my chest tightening. He had borrowed from everyone: siblings, cousins, even his own parents. He had drained not just my future, but the patience and trust of an entire family. Reading those letters was like peeling back layers of a wound I hadn't known existed. This wasn't just about me. This was a legacy of selfishness. I made a vow that night it would end with me. The trial date was set. The closer it came, the more desperate he grew. His texts turned frantic, then venomous. "You'll regret this. You'll destroy this family. You think you're strong, but you're nothing without me." But each word only proved my point. He had never seen me for who I was. He only saw what I could give him. The morning of the trial, I stood in front of the mirror in my grandmother's house, adjusting the blazer she had bought for me. My hands shook, but not from fear, from determination. "This is your moment," Grandma said softly, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Not just to reclaim what he stole, but to show him and yourself that you are stronger than his lies." When I entered the courtroom, my father was already there. He looked smaller than I remembered, sitting hunched over, his bravado dimmed. For the first time, I saw not a powerful figure looming over me, but a man cornered by his own choices. As the proceedings began, I spoke my truth. I told the judge about the years of saving the scholarships, the sacrifices. I showed the documents, the texts, the evidence of intent. My voice cracked at times, but I never stopped. Because every word was not just for the court, it was for me. When my father was asked to respond, he stumbled. His charm faltered under the weight of facts. His excuses unraveled in the face of hard proof. And as I watched him, I realized something: I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to destroy him. The truth was enough. The truth was louder than any lie he had ever told. That day ended without a final verdict, but I knew I had already won something greater than money. I had reclaimed my voice. Walking out of the courthouse, the sky felt brighter, the air sharper. My grandmother squeezed my hand, her smile small but fierce. "You did it," she whispered. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "And I'll keep doing it, until he can't hurt us anymore." But deep down, I knew the hardest part was still to come. Because men like my father don't let go of control easily. And the closer we got to the truth, the more dangerous his desperation would become. In the days following the first court session, the atmosphere in our family felt like glass cracking under pressure, fragile, sharp, and ready to shatter at the slightest touch. I stayed at Grandma's house, where the air smelled of cinnamon tea and old books, a refuge from the storm. But even in the quiet safety of her home, I could feel the chaos swirling just outside. My father hadn't spoken to me since the hearing, but his presence lingered like smoke. He left voicemails on my mother's phone, furious rants about betrayal, about how she had poisoned me against him. He even drove past Grandma's house one night, parking across the street with his headlights dimmed, as if he could intimidate me simply by reminding me he was still there. I didn't sleep much that week. I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, my heart racing, imagining every scenario. What if he tried to storm in? What if he tried to take documents? What if he turned his desperation into something worse? "Don't worry," Grandma said firmly one night, placing her hand over mine. "We have the truth, and the truth always outlasts lies." Her words calmed me, but only just. Because deep down, I knew men like my father didn't bow to truth. They fought it tooth and nail even when it destroyed them. The next court session revealed just how deep his desperation ran. He tried to paint me as ungrateful as spoiled. He brought up stories from my childhood moments twisted beyond recognition, like shadows cast on a wall. He told the judge that I had always been high maintenance, that I had never appreciated the sacrifices he made. For a moment, his words pierced me, dragging me back into the familiar swamp of guilt. I could almost hear my younger self whispering, maybe he's right. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I didn't deserve it all. But then Aunt Sarah stood, her voice steady, her evidence airtight. "Your Honor, here are the bank statements. Here are the emails. Here are the texts where he explicitly acknowledges this was her education fund. This isn't about a father providing or not providing. This is about theft, plain and simple." My father's face reddened, his composure slipping. The judge, expression unreadable, nodded slowly as the evidence piled higher. Outside the courthouse afterward, I leaned against the cold stone wall, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Grandma touched my shoulder, her eyes proud. "You held your ground," she whispered. But even as I nodded, I knew it wasn't over. The storm came that weekend. I was studying in the living room when the doorbell rang. My stomach dropped at the sound. Some instinct told me who it was before I even stood. When I opened the door, there he was, my father. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt rumpled, his smile sharp as broken glass. "Princess," he said, the word that once held sweetness now curdled with manipulation. "Can we talk?" I kept the chain on the door. "There's nothing to talk about." He laughed, the sound hollow. "You think this court nonsense will fix anything? You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone and walk away clean?" His smile vanished, replaced by something darker. "I made you. Without me, you'd be nothing." My chest tightened, fear and rage colliding. "No," I said through the crack in the door. "I made myself. You just took." For a moment, his mask cracked. His jaw twitched, his hands clenched. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. That night, I couldn't shake the image of his face, the fury burning behind his eyes. But instead of letting it weaken me, I let it harden me. His anger wasn't proof of my weakness. It was proof of his loss of control. The final piece of the puzzle came from Uncle Mark, my father's younger brother. He had been silent through most of the ordeal, but one evening he called me. His voice was rough, hesitant, as if confessing something long buried. "Vanessa," he said, "I need to tell you something about your father, about the loans." I braced myself. "He's been moving money around for years, credit cards, shady business deals, even borrowing from dangerous people. That's why he emptied your fund. It wasn't just about paying debts. It was about keeping those people off his back." He paused. "I didn't speak up sooner because I was scared. But you deserve to know." My blood ran cold. So it wasn't just selfishness, it was desperation. He had gambled with my future to cover the holes in his own failing life. When I told Grandma, her face paled, but her voice was iron. "Then he's not just a thief, he's reckless, and that makes him dangerous." The next court date loomed like a storm cloud. But this time I felt ready. Not because I thought it would be easy, but because I finally saw the truth for what it was. My father wasn't a giant towering over me. He was a man drowning in the mess he had made, clawing at me to pull him under with him. And I refused to sink. The morning of the final hearing, I stood in front of the mirror again, my reflection steadier than before. My grandmother clasped a necklace around my neck, a simple silver chain she had worn for years. "For strength," she said. When we entered the courtroom, my father looked smaller than ever. His bravado was gone, his eyes darting nervously as evidence was laid out in full. Uncle Mark testified, his voice trembling, but clear. Aunt Sarah's arguments cut like steel. And me, I spoke my truth one last time. Not with anger, not with spite, but with clarity. "I worked for that money," I told the judge. "Every scholarship, Every shift, every sacrifice was mine. My father took it because he thought he could, because he always has. But this time I'm saying no. This time I'm fighting back. The room was silent as my words echoed. For once, my father had nothing to say. The final hearing felt like the closing act of a long, painful play. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped together, my grandmother's necklace resting against my collarbone. Every beat of my heart seemed to echo in the silent courtroom. My father looked worn, the confidence that had once filled his stride gone. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes darting nervously. He had built his life on charm and manipulation, but here those weapons no longer worked. Here it was evidence, facts, and truth that mattered. The judge leaned forward, reviewing the thick stack of documents laid out before her: bank statements, text messages, testimony from my uncle, from my mother, even from cousins who had loaned him money in the past. My father had left a trail of betrayal too wide to cover. When the judge finally spoke, the words came like a gavel striking stone. This court finds sufficient evidence that the funds in question were intended for the education of the plaintiff, Vanessa Smith. Though the account bore the defendant's name, the established intent and repeated acknowledgement make clear this was not his money to use. My breath caught as she continued. Therefore, the court orders the restitution of $42,000 to the plaintiff. Additionally, due to the defendant's history of misappropriation and financial misconduct, further investigation into other claims brought forth by family members will proceed. The room was quiet, the air heavy with the weight of justice. My father's mouth opened as if to protest, but no sound came. For the first time in my life, I watched him truly powerless. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry out in triumph. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, like the closing of a wound. When court adjourned, he looked at me, his eyes desperate, searching. For forgiveness, perhaps. For the daughter he thought would always bend. But I gave him nothing. Just silence. Because silence, I realized, was the only response left. Outside, reporters and curious onlookers buzzed, but I kept walking. My grandmother's arm looped through mine. "You did it," she whispered, pride shining in her eyes. "I just told the truth," I said softly. But telling the truth had cost me dearly. That night, alone in my room, I let the tears come. Not for the money that I would rebuild. Not for the case that I had won. But for the father I had lost long before I even realized it. The trial hadn't destroyed him. His own choices had. And yet, amid the grief, there was relief. I had drawn a line. I had broken the cycle. I had refused to be his safety net, his scapegoat, his silent daughter. Weeks passed. The restitution arrived slowly in pieces, much of it through garnished wages and seized assets. It wasn't glamorous, but it was justice. And with it, I re-enrolled in my program. Walking onto campus again felt like reclaiming stolen ground. Some nights, though, I would remember his face in court, the anger, the fear, the hollow look when the verdict came down. And I wondered if he ever understood the magnitude of what he had done. If he ever saw me not as a resource, but as his daughter. But whether he did or not no longer mattered. I poured my energy into my studies, into friendships I had neglected, into building a life that was mine alone. And slowly, piece by piece, the weight lifted. My mother finalized her divorce, stepping into her own freedom after years of financial captivity. My grandmother, though weary from the ordeal, smiled more easily, as though a long shadow had finally moved away from her door. My uncle thanked me more than once, saying, "You did what none of us could. You stood up." And me, I learned that standing up wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about watching him fall. It was about reclaiming myself. One evening, as I sat with Grandma in her garden, she turned to me, her eyes glistening. "Do you know what I'm proudest of?" she asked. I shook my head. "That you didn't let his lies become your truth," she said softly. "You carried the weight of his betrayal, but you didn't let it bury you. That takes courage." I swallowed, hard tears stinging my eyes. "Sometimes it still hurts," I admitted. "It always will," she said. "But hurt is proof you're alive. And you, my dear, are alive and stronger than ever." I looked at the fading sunlight, the way it painted the world gold, and felt something stir in me. A lesson. A truth I would carry forward. Betrayal does not define us. It exposes those who betray. And in that exposure, we find our strength not because we wanted to fight, but because we had no choice. As I tell you my story now, I want you to remember this. If someone steals from you, lies to you, or tries to erase your future, you have the right to fight back. Not out of vengeance, but out of love for yourself, for the life you're building, for the truth that cannot be silenced. My father emptied my college fund, but he did not empty me. He could not steal my determination, my voice, or my worth. Those are mine to keep and mine to grow. And if my story resonates with you, if you've ever been betrayed by the very people who should have protected you, know this: you are not alone. You are stronger than you think. If my journey gave you something to hold on to, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth. And leave me a comment below. I would love to hear your story too. Because together our voices are louder than betrayal.